Good. Thank you, Moni. So welcome to the pitch webinar that we have for today. Thank you for being here, and thank you to those that are going to be connecting online and watching this later. And we can go to the next slide. So today we're going to do a little bit of overview. A lot of also going over the details of how to submit the projects, how to submit them, when to submit it, and what are the guidelines there. So let's take a look at our timeline. We will continue to be available via email to answer any questions as we get closer to the submission deadline. Remember that you can still watch all the recording of all the webinars, and they're available under our main page, just under the timeline section. And they include the slides as well as all the previous recordings for all the webinars. So all those are available. And if you want to go back, watch them just as a recap, that's fine. Or if you still have any questions, feel free to email us, Moni or me. An important date for you to remember is the magic date here. It's April. Go ahead, Moni.
No, I was just saying the magic date.
The magic date. It's April 30th. April 30th. Abril 30. The date the video pitches are due. So this is when all the pitches are due. And this is like the last day to submit all your pitches. So make sure that you bookmark this date. And winners will be announced on May 19. And as we progress through the webinar, we'll go over all the details for this too. So we want to do a progress check-in. I know some of you are connected, and we kind of chatted a little bit with Selena too, but Selena, if you want to also jump in and share, again, that's fine, so we can all hear from each other. So during the last webinar, we talked about prototyping, which included designing, building, and testing your solution with your students. So now we're gonna do a check-in with your team and see how the students were able to progress through the prototype phase. So you can see some of the questions that we included here to do a check-in. Feel free to type in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourselves and share with the group. You can answer one or all questions here. So some of the questions that we have: how are students' teams progressing through the prototype phase? What activities were helpful for your students? Which activities were the most helpful? So trying to gather a little bit of feedback here from you too. And what has been working well for your students? So again, feel free to take a look at those questions. Take a moment. You can type in your answers in the chat, or you can unmute yourself also and share with the whole group. So is there anybody that wants to share? Selena, do you want to go ahead and share what you had shared earlier, just so the whole team can hear me? I think you're muted, Selena, if you're trying to share.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. We started with two students only participating in the virtual exchange. And when they began telling the other students, some of them got interested in participating.
Right.
So I register, I think, more than 15 teams. They are working right now on their all of the worksheets. I downloaded like 2 worksheets for understanding, 2 for ideate, 2 for prototype, and 1 for the pitch. And they began all working on the same thing. So I have some of my students are here, and the team on the back, they are working, they're from this group, and they're working, they have a project for the Jacobs Innovation Challenge. and they're just finishing up the prototype phase this week. We're going on spring break and they're coming back and just recording the video.
Nice, that's amazing, Selena. Selena, what are some of the topics they're working on, I wonder?
Some people are working on food for diabetics. The team that is here is working for a, ¿cómo se llama usted? Pero ¿qué proyecto es? O sea, ¿qué? Oh, an insecticide. They're doing an insecticide. Some people are working on services. The other team that's right here, they're working on the service for people who have pets and can take care of them. So we have like a wide variety of projects.
Nice. Thank you, Selena, for sharing. Anybody else wants to share what any of their experience so far? Feel free to type in the chat or unmute yourselves. Anything that you want to share about how students are progressing. Okay.
We have shy educators today.
Yeah, we'll come back to this question at the end. Maybe we'll see how the conversation evolves. But thank you so much, Selena. It makes a difference to see the students working in the projects and how they're using the activity. So thank you so much for sharing. So today we're gonna do the pitch phase. We're gonna do an overview of what the pitch phase is. So what is it? This is the culmination of all the work, all the research and the exploration that students have put into their project. So bringing all that together to form their pitch. In the next slide, we'll walk through the activities within the pitch phase to assist students in putting together their final presentation for submission on April 30th, on the magical date, April 30th. So pitching means telling the story of your solution and convincing others that your solution can better the world. So let's take a moment and watch this video, and then we'll do a summary.
You have a prototype of your solution, it's time to pitch it to others. A pitch is a presentation that tells people the story of the problem you are solving and persuades them to believe in your team and your idea. To create a pitch, your team will need to craft the story of how and why you came up with your solution. You'll want to draw people in and create an emotional connection so they understand the impact your solution will make on others and the world. You'll also want to capture their minds by explaining why your solution is valuable and convince them that your solution has the potential to change the world. You'll create an appealing pitch deck and use media to support your story. Once you have completed your deck, you'll share your story in a pitch presentation. You've built something that makes the world better. Be proud of your innovation.
So the main point that I want to emphasize here is that building the emotional connection as part of your pitch. And let me give you some examples. So pitching means telling the story of your solution and convincing others that your solution can better the world. When students are able to show the why behind their project, they capture an important aspect of their story. So helping students explain through the pitch phase, why did they choose this problem? Why is it relevant to them? Another question to address during a pitch may include how this problem affects them, a family member, community member, or a person close to him. Why does the student care about this specific problem or challenge? Why did they decide to start researching about this? How does this connect to their life or someone close to him? Making the connection between the problem and the solution helps them create the narrative behind their pitch and gives meaning to their presentation. Overall, pitching is a student's team's opportunity to sell their idea. They'll use persuasive strategies and storytelling conventions to convince their audience to believe their solutions can really make a difference for a better of the world. Next, we will go over some activities that will help students achieve this goal. So within PACFO, as you have seen, there are several activities for students to engage during the pitch phase. This one is divided into two categories, craft it and share it. So let's take a look. As you remember, we recommend completing two to five activities, but we'll leave it up to you to decide which one makes the most sense for your classroom. In the crafted category, we will find activities 1 through 5 to help students craft their story, which will include creating an outline for their story, creating a solution slogan, creating a name, creating a competitor matrix where students research similar products to their own solution, and finally, creating a value proposition statement by comparing features and benefits of their solutions. All activities provide templates and fill in the blank statements to support students in completion of these activities. The two final activities focus on ways teams can share their story. Activity number 6, create your presentation, provide students with tips and pointers to help them create a slide deck for the pitch. So we provided a template that you can share with students, and everything is kind of labeled already to help them create their pitch under the share it category. In activity 7, pitch event, the pitch rubric is introduced along with helpful reminders to students, teams up to the moment leading up to the pitch itself, which we will go over on the next slides. So before we move on, does anybody have any questions related to the activities that we can answer?
Lena asked a question about is the template online? Yes, it's part of that activity now, and actually that's relatively new. We just added that last week. I would encourage you to think about or to remind the students to that is a template to guide them, but they probably want to make the look and feel sort of unique to their solution. So it's just a guiding thing, but you know, encourage them to make it their own so that it has some unique characteristics.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, so the template itself is there, but once students go through it, feel free to modify them or craft it in whatever way works best for the class or their own team. So we wanted to share a little bit of our experience here. Moni and I had the opportunity to help a group of youth here in San Diego through a live camp and walk them through the challenge. And some of the things that we noticed that really helped the students pitch were, I'm going to mention two things, and maybe Moni, you can add something. But one of them was creating that personal connection. Like when students are pitching and recording their pitch, why is having students explain the reason behind this project. Why did they decide to choose this project? How is it relevant to them, to their family, or to someone in their community or their school? And also the energy of the students in the pitch. Support students, help them, coach them, practice so the students feel confident when presenting their final pitch. Moni, is there anything else you would add there?
No, I think that's it. I mean, this is just really, for those of us, who are adults and have had to do things like, presentations and pitches and that sort of thing, I think we're familiar with this, but I think it's helping the students understand that their energy and connection and how they sort of talk about it and share really helps make the connection for other people when they're watching. And that really is a nice thing. And I will point out, I just put it in the chat, do we have a set of the winning pitches from last year's challenge? And I think, there are some in there that are really good. Obviously they were winners, so I think that they're really good, but they also captured the whole essence of the work that they did, including really making sure that they highlighted and shared the work of their actual prototype. The work that they did, kind of incorporating that into the presentation, is really essential to kind of bring the whole piece together. So just a couple of examples. Obviously some students are, better able and more willing to kind of stand up and be more effective right out of the gate with this, and others need more practice. And this is a perfect opportunity to help them with those skills.
Yeah, thank you, Moni. Definitely. And I will also just add, think from like the educator side, think from the perspective a little bit, put yourself in the shoes of someone who's going to be judging the presentation and trying to, when you're watching the recording, see like where the student's able to capture that essence that Monty is referring to, no, that the essence of the prototype, the main, well, what the rubric asks you to, which we can go over next. So here's an overview of the rubric. Please refer to the rubric impactful for a full description. There are 5 sections where groups will be graded on, including the problem where the students state the problem that they're addressing, the persuasion where students forms a compelling case for their project, the slides content, the prototype that Monty was referring to, where students successfully construct a prototype that has been tested, iterated, and based on the user input. So showing that you have created a prototype, you have gathered feedback from users, you have gathered any kind of insight from those that are potentially going to use this project, and the overall presentation of their pitch. The grading scale goes from 1 to 3, where the lowest score 1 is given for content that needs more work, a 2 for content that meets criteria, and 3 for the work that shows full comprehension and implementation of the assignment or exceeds the expectations. So we can take now any questions about the rubric that you have.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone has looked ahead into the rubric, but it is pretty detailed. It's linked right in that, it's linked right in Packful. It's also on that Packful webpage because it is also, this is the rubric that we will use to make our decisions about the final winners for the challenge. So we make this all out there for you and for the students too, so they understand how we might rank them and make those decisions. And hopefully you'll have an opportunity to do some of that work in your class in minutes.
We can take any questions regarding the pitch phase or the rubric.
We'll have time in case those come up. I'm going to reiterate the points about the pitch phase here soon. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move us along, but we can definitely come back to the pitch rubric and any of those details because I think it is really important. Now we want to talk about what are the process for like submitting your pitches to us for consideration. So the first thing to remember is that when we set out on this endeavor, each of you are support. In some cases, you only have 1 team, and I know that that's true. In other cases, we have people, Selena just mentioned she has 15 teams. I know somebody who may have upwards of, I think maybe even 30 teams that they're supporting. In the end, each educator who's registered in the challenge event can submit 1 pitch and slide deck to us for each 6 student teams you're supporting. So if you look at the graph on the right, that kind of gives you an indication. If you had 6 or fewer total teams, we want you to submit 1 to us for consideration for prizes. If you had multiple classes or multiple groups working on this, just looking at the grid, that's the idea. So there is some narrowing that we are expecting you to do before you submit them to us. We will not take all of the team submissions that you may have supported multiple teams. We don't want to see them all. We want to see the ones that you have selected to share with us. Ideally, from having conducted a in-class pitch competition, which I'm going to talk about just a little bit further. So the pitch videos themselves, we need a video recorded pitch. That can be a recording from an actual live classroom pitch that may have happened in front of you. It could also be something that you did on Zoom or Google Meets or whatever. But ultimately, we do need a recorded video pitch that you can share with us. And each pitch video for students should be no more than 5 minutes. I think most of them, there's no right answer here, by the way, but most of them come in about 2 or 3 minutes. So just thinking about that, but we just want to make sure that it doesn't go too long, so we can cap it at 5 minutes. The submissions for our prize consideration will happen through a Google form, and that form already exists. I will share it with you here via email after this event. It's also already linked on our webpage. But the idea here is that you will complete a little bit of information about who you are and the number of students who completed the challenge, the number of teams you supported. So like in Selena's case, she would put 15 there, and I don't know how many students, but maybe 45. And then they do ask and ensure, make sure that you do have to make sure that Packful gets updated to reflect the work that you did. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. But ultimately, how many student teams you're submitting? In Selena's case, she gets to submit 2 teams because of the number, actually 3 teams because of the number that she had. So then you kind of enter a sequence of information about each student team, and I'll come back to that. As I mentioned, we will use the Packful pitch rubric to evaluate the pitches for ultimate prizes, and then the winners will be announced via email and social media by May 19th. Any questions about this? Sometimes this does trip people up because you might be thinking, if you worked with 2 teams, you have to select one. If you worked with 1 team, you can select them, you get lucky. But if you had, we try to strike a balance here for those educators who are supporting, much larger groups. We're trying to strike the right balance so they have an opportunity to submit additional teams. That's the whole reason behind this number scheme. So as I mentioned, when you're submitting the pitches to us, you'll have to, each submission for each team that you are submitting to us for consideration, you'll have to include all of this information on that Google form. So it's on the form, it'll be the project/solution name. At this point, by the time they're submitting the pitches, we think it's morphed from a project into a solution. This description of the solution, the student's name, the team name, number of students, global goal, a question about whether it's related to photonics, and I have another slide on that, and then a public pitch video URL and a public slide deck URL. And the reason for that is, in some cases, even though those pitches are presumably already impactful, in some cases we don't actually have access to them depending on how your Google account is set up. So in this case, what we would ask you to do is make sure that they are publicly available, either post them on your school's YouTube channel or Vimeo, or you can use Google Drive, but you just got to make sure that the links are absolutely available publicly. And then the last thing that you have to do for each team is to acknowledge that you are allowed to share this, because in some cases it may contain student names and student, obviously their faces. It doesn't have to contain their faces if you're concerned about that. It could just contain voiceovers. That's okay. But be mindful of those things if you're making a recording, because we will want you to disclose to us that we are able to use those pitch videos and the slide decks for media and promotional purposes. The primary one of which would be to put them on our website to share with the whole world about the winners. So we want to make sure that we can share those out, and so we need to make sure that those are there. This last bottom piece is we also are encouraging you, not encouraging, we're requiring that the information in Packful also mirrors the information you're supplying in the form for the submission, so that we're going to go look and just verify that the whole project exists in Packful. It has all the 4 phases marked as approved, and the student name, the project name is there, the description's been updated, it matches with the latest information, all those kinds of details. So we just want to make sure that Packful matches what you're submitting to us so that we can true them up and find them. Any questions? It's a lot of information fast. As a reminder, winning teams will be able to designate their prize amounts to charity. So the prizes for first place is $1,000 to a charity of their choice. We will work with you if you are the educator for one of the winning teams. We will then work with you after the winning process to identify the charity and get the payments to those charities. That tends to take a little while just because we have to deal with accounting and tax stuff and whatever, but that'll happen after May 19th. And as a final reminder, for each team that you're submitting, we do have a question in there about whether or not the project has anything to do with photonics. So if it does have something to do with photonics, specifically the science of light waves, then that team could be eligible for an additional $1,000 sponsored prize from DRS Daylight Solutions. So it is possible for a team to win both one of our prizes and this prize, It's also possible for a team to win only this prize and not one of our prizes. It'll just really depend on the outcomes, and that's the arrangement we have with our sponsor. So remember, we want you to narrow the number of teams you submit to us, unless you're in that case where you only had one team. So you can do that a number of ways. The way we would recommend is that you host it in class or online pitch competition with your students. Host it with all the student teams. Have the students actually complete the rubric for the other team so they get an opportunity to kind of grade or evaluate each team. And then you could collect those and evaluate them or decide on ranking them or however that works best. But that may help you in the narrowing process. It's that impactful pitch rubric that we think is the best mechanism to do that. And so that's what we would encourage. And so that's the bottom line piece, is that helping you to narrow the number of teams that you ultimately submit to us. Just some fun things. We just want to take a moment to spotlight some of the work that we've seen on social media that's been shared with the public and with us over the last month or so on some of the progress. So just some great videos that we've seen, some pictures, some updates. Both we've seen things on Instagram and on Twitter, and we just love seeing those shares. We've also, as we mentioned, some of those folks have won Storyteller Awards for doing the sharing with us. And the idea there really is just to kind of promote publicly sharing and getting the information out about the challenge and the work that the students are doing. So as you progress through these final few weeks, there's still an opportunity to share on social media and celebrate the work that they're doing with the public. That's the official end of our slide presentation, but I do want to give time for any questions about any part of this, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Remember, you've got to narrow the number of teams you have. I've got, which page did that go to? Where'd it go? Remember to you'll have to narrow the number of teams you submit to us. You'll need to submit them to us via the Google form. And I will send that link out via email afterward. And as I mentioned, it's already on our webpage too. In case you ever need links, you can always just go directly to the Packful website, click on this big banner at the top, and all the way down, scrolling down here, are all the links to the recording and slides from the prior webinars. This is actually the link to the actual submission form that you'll need to complete. And then there's also a link right here on the pitch rubric.
Mane, we do have a few questions in the chat. There's one that says, my partner and I created screens for our app project, but it's not fully functional, meaning we have not coded it out. Will this mean that we would get an incomplete in the rubric? And then Elena is just asking, do we have access to the rubric?
So yeah, we definitely have access to the rubric. Ask me that question again, because I didn't see it in the chat. It must have come to you directly. Say it again, Bianca, the first one.
The first one. So they didn't code the app project. They just have like screenshots. Would that be considered incomplete for the grading rubric?
Yeah, so the answer is no, none of this work is ever incomplete. It's always a work in progress. We want to see the best that we can. And some of you had more time than others to work with students. Some may not have even gotten to the final prototype or had struggles, or they tried to get something and it didn't work. That learning process is really critical and important. So it's okay. We just ask you and to help the students do the best they can with the pitch that they have. Show off what they have, talk about it as best they can, kind of complete those narratives. And yeah, I mean, there may be some elements of the ultimate, if the prototype is not complete, that's okay. We will use the rubric to make those decisions, and you can see what's on there. So one of the questions that's on the rubric is about the actual prototype, which is addresses the plausibility of the solution, as in, it actually can be something that they can create. Effectively explains the functionality of the prototype. You can do that even if you had just a mock-up. You can do the best you can. Successfully constructs a prototype. That may be a place where they might get a little bit lower, only because, depending on the outcome, it depends on how far. But don't worry, our intent here is really help students develop an innovator's mindset and these skills. And so while they might get dinged here or there on some of the rubric, I've had teams in the past and educators who've submitted students' work that they thought was incomplete or not quite there, and they ended up winning or becoming a finalist. And that's okay. So I wouldn't get too worked up about that. We just want to see the best work that you can and help them celebrate.
Yeah, and just to mention that you saw that rubric and everything we went over is in the impactful. So as you progress through the different activities, you'll see the link for each one. So just pay close attention to each slide, to each activity impactful, and you'll have access to those. And just a general reminder for the virtual exchange. So those of you who are participating in the virtual exchange, I sent out an email with the last activities, and thank you so much for providing the feedback. I still need to get back to you about the feedback that you have been provided, but I tried to align the last activities for with the challenge. So yeah, check your email for those activities, and thank you to those who have been able to participate. Any other questions related to anything we have gone over?
As Bianca mentioned, we are here. We can help you if you have questions on an ongoing basis. Let us know. You've got our emails, probably too many of them. Reminders from me, but feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help if you need it. If there are no other questions, then I will close down.
We can stop the recording and then just wait if anybody has any one-on-one questions.
Yeah, let me do